Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Found Friday. Today is the second in a series that we're doing about keyword best practices for marketing strategy. Last week, if you were here, you know that we talked about sharing data between social and search to improve both efforts. And today we're going to focus on using search keyword data to create better content. I'm your host, Karen Skates, and with me today is Erin O'Brien, our COO. Welcome, Erin. How you doing?
Hey, doing good.
Great. Creating content that actually gets found and creates conversions is something we're all hoping to achieve. So today I thought we'd give folks some practical advice about how to do that and stay ahead of the competition. So let's get started. In case people weren't here last week, can you kind of recap what are keywords in relationship to marketing?
Yeah, of course. So keywords are the targeted topics and words that you want associated with your brand, as well as kind of how your audience is finding you and your content. There are a couple of really important things to remember here. The first is that keywords don't have to be just individual words. They can be phrases, products, taglines, etc. So, like a string of words, a description, etc. The second thing to remember is that your targeted keywords may not be what's really driving traffic to your content. So it's important to look at keywords from both angles, the ones that you want to drive traffic from your audience and the ones that actually are. So you want to be sure that you have the most accurate information based on kind of your desired target keywords and actual keywords that are really working for you.
Great. So now that we've defined keywords, how does someone go about finding relevant keywords for their brand and their content?
So there are a lot of ways to find out what keywords are driving traffic to your content, although fewer now after kind of keywords not provided. And we went through this last week, but there's a couple different things. So if there's someone in charge of SEO at your brand, obviously I think that it's important to ask that person. You can get kind of a list of ranking keywords. And I think that one of the things that I touched on last week that's really important is you really want to know both rank and volume data. And by volume, I mean search volume. And that's important because when you're talking about prioritization, you want to know things in terms of how high you're currently ranking and where you might need to make improvements. But you also want to know total search volume, because what you're really looking at there is, how to spend your time. So if something has, hundreds or thousands of searches per month, obviously that, ranking higher means you're at least going to get some traffic there. Spending time on something that may only have 10, 15, 20 searches per month on kind of the grand scheme of things may not be where you decide to concentrate your efforts. So, if you don't have anything that's kind of in place in terms of an analytics tool, I'd say that you can check out Google AdWords Keyword Planner tool if you've got an AdWords account. If not, there's lots of keyword tools out there that you can find that are free. You can also give us a shout at Ginza and we'll show you kind of around what we've got for our platform as well.
Great. So once you've found your keywords, how do you differentiate between what's popular now, what's evergreen content, and what might help your audiences to actually convert?
So this is really interesting. Sometimes what's popular, what's good long-term content, and what creates conversions are all the same thing, but not always. So it's important to think about keywords in kind of a few different ways to maximize your use of them. In terms of popularity, what we're really talking about here is kind of trending topics, right? The things that people are really excited about that are getting a lot of buzz on social media and things like that. Trending topics are great because you can create content that's part of a discussion that's happening right now and that is top of mind. But keep in mind that a good way to leverage trending topics is to tie them back to larger, more evergreen issues that your audience has, so that you're not only staying relevant on current topics, but really kind of contributing back to this larger cycle of things that kind of either you've already created or that are part of a larger need set. So talking about evergreen topics, these are kind of your real bread and butter, right? These are things that your audience likely deals with on a regular basis. They're also likely to be tied to goals that your audience members have, whether the goals are business related for B2B folks or personal aspirations in or desires in maybe more of a B2C setting. By keeping at least a couple of evergreen topics in your content and social rotation, you're going to make sure that you're always appealing to these like really basic issues and needs that your users struggle with. And that way you'll be seen as kind of a reliable place to talk to and go to for more trending topics. Okay, so both of these things can create conversions. So that's not necessarily a separate topic. That said, sometimes what creates conversions are appeals to budget, sensibility, and other needs that don't always align with things like trending topics. So keep in mind that, to create conversions, things are likely to shift throughout the year, or even throughout the month, in terms of like what really does appeal to creating conversions. So for instance, like around the holidays, obviously what creates conversions is different than what might create conversions at different times. When people come up with new budget or are ending like a fiscal year, when you're talking about B2B stuff, that may be a really great time to focus on a conversion creation then. So make sure that you use a platform that allows you to keep an eye on what's really contributing to conversions at the individual keyword and content level, and kind of watch how that shifts cyclically.
And we've talked a little bit before about how to track seasonality in some earlier episodes, and I'll be sure to include some links to that seasonality for people to get a little deeper dive into that. So how can marketers use keyword data to improve that content that they've already created, that existing content?
So anytime you kind of already know what topics and keywords that your audience is interested in and what content they're being driven to from those keywords, you have a much better chance of creating a conversion or making a sale. When we're talking about existing content, there's a few ways that marketers can use keyword information to kind of amp it up. The first is going to be by knowing what keywords are already driving traffic to that content, and then using those keywords in social media shares, email subject lines, landing page URLs and headers. And because you're already ranking highly for these keywords on search, then it's showing a positive relationship between the keyword and the content. So you should really use that to your advantage as you promote and share that content. And even if it's evergreen content that's been around for a while, if you see it start to change in rank and start to gain some traction, and we've got kind of a top keyword activity area in Ginza metrics that'll show you like your content that has really started to like gain and change traction. That's actually a great time to go back and re-promote that evergreen content. So the next way you can use keywords to improve existing content is to look at what keywords are relevant and highly searched by individual pieces of content, and then go back and pick a couple of pieces of relevant content to give a refresh to. So this can include anything from like adding more depth of content around that particular subject, or more technical things that have to do with page structure. So like header tags, meta descriptions, or other elements that make sure that the keywords that you're actually ranking for are included in every possible good SEO place throughout that piece of content. So, one of the things we do is we provide recommendations at the site and individual page level that can actually be sorted by your targeted keywords. So what you can do is you can actually optimize that page for a selected keyword as keywords change throughout kind of like the life cycle of a piece of content. So, I mean, if you're using a tool that would allow you to do that, I'd say that that's a really good quick win to refresh existing content and amp up your traffic.
Yeah, I think there's a big mistake made when people think about content as one and done. So you produce the content, you stick it on your website, and you move on, and you never look back to that existing content. Sometimes just working with what you already have, taking a little bit of time, can really increase your SEO value and increase the value of the content that you already have. So kind of remembering that content is there and keeping an eye on that popular content and keeping it fresh, I think is something that, in that always creating new content cycle that we get into, people kind of forget about that value.
Well, and you'll also notice too, if you pay attention to keywords and content, that what'll happen is that old content will gain popularity for different reasons, especially if you've done the work to make sure that it is findable on search. so you will see pieces of content kind of resurface. And if you're paying attention to kind of that bubbling resurfacing, you can leverage it across multiple marketing channels. So you don't just need to let it bubble back up on search. Then you can take that kind of resurgence of excitement around that topic and share it via social, share it via email, like, kind of use your other distribution outlets to kind of repump that up again.
So beyond improving that existing content, how can marketers use keyword data to figure out what new content to create?
So, I mean, obviously, again, like if you know what keywords and topics your audience is looking at, you can naturally kind of create some better content to match that need. I want to go back to the earlier segment we're talking about, like what's popular, what's like popular trending content, evergreen content, and converting content. You should really keep these things in mind when you're creating new content based on keywords, because it's going to help you figure out what type of content to create and how much time and energy to expend on it. So kind of here are a few of my personal suggestions and guidelines. For trending topics, I like to create kind of quick create and consume content. For example, I would maybe create, like a Pinterest board, a hashtag for Twitter and Instagram, some quick vines, maybe even like a Google Hangout with a live conversation about a topic that happens to be important right now. Anything that you can really put together in kind of less than an hour. And get approved quickly, right? And the reason is that the ROI is not going to be there for something that took you 3 days to put together and get approved if the conversation is pretty much over by the time you get done creating it, right? So like you need to make sure that you have at your disposal kind of pre-approval to create some of this quick hit content and a stable of ideas for quick create and consume content. For evergreen topics and keywords, I usually want a variety of content types that all work together to engage the audience. For example, I might have, email, landing pages, blog posts, ads, social media, video, infographics, etc., all around a particular keyword and topic area. And honestly, I don't care what anybody says about infographics being over. People still click on them constantly. I just wouldn't do one if you're not going to take the time to do it right. And since we're talking about evergreen, it's really important. This is where SEO value is huge, right? Because you want organic traffic as opposed to just paid, because paid stops working when you stop writing checks. High-ranking content stays high-ranking content. There are blog posts out there that are still in the top 3 from 2009. So good content is honestly good content. So if you're really going to take the time to create it, keep keywords in mind. Keep those target keywords in mind, because that's going to be what keeps it up at the top long after you're done creating it. Okay. So when it comes to conversion content, remember I said these can be the same as trending and evergreen, but keep in mind if you're talking about a page specifically designed to convert someone using a specific action, that you've really thought through all the types of actions that an audience member might take and what that content is built on. So for example, what's the best conversion for a trending topic versus a longer standing audience member who's maybe visited your evergreen content a few times? Sometimes you're just going for kind of like initial engagement and an intro to your brand, while other times you're really looking for like a purchase or a form fill. So you have to consider what type of content you're creating kind of within that segment.
So I think one of the challenges for marketers is to be able to discover those new keywords that they're not already tracking. So how can they do that, and why is that important?
So discovering new keywords is difficult for a lot of marketers because it's not always at the forefront of their mind, and it's not featured in a lot of tools that people use. I know that there's social media tools that kind of talk about trending topics and related topics, but what you really need is a combination of not just what people are talking about, but the content that it's associated with. So for options for doing this, like baked into the Ginzametrics platform is keyword discovery and competitor discovery, kind of based on your content and targeted keywords, and those things work hand in hand really well. If you're not using our platform or one that provides this information, then I would suggest doing what we call a discovery board. And discovery boards can be in the form of a spreadsheet or Word document. And they come from visiting things like forums, Facebook posts, LinkedIn, blog posts, etc., and really being an observer as to what potential users' problems, concerns, and current issues are, and how people are proposing to solve them. So for example, things like problems mentioned by potential users, suggested solutions or hypothesis for how to solve the issue, tools mentioned in the response. So if somebody's like make it, or like a product, so if somebody's mentioning a product that would be a solution, you want to make note of that. Best practices kind of currently in use to solve the problem, and keywords and phrases that you see used a lot. You know, from this information, you can also see what people are talking about it, how they're talking about it, what kinds of messaging actually directly applies to problems that your audience members are having. Because discovery boards are really hard to describe without visuals, I'd like to propose we do kind of like a separate whiteboard session on how to set them up, and we'll attach it to this blog post from the show. But we've talked about discovery boards a little bit before, so I'm happy to kind of dive into that deeper on an individual basis too, but I think visuals really work best for that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We talked, I know, a little bit about discovery boards last week as well. So maybe we can give people a little deeper dive into exactly what those look like. And of course, if people have questions about that, they want to get started immediately, you can always contact us and we'll get some information to you immediately on that. So what do you think marketers can learn from competitor keyword data that's going to help them to create better content?
So, I mean, while it might seem like kind of an obvious idea to use competitor keyword data to create better content, there's a lot of missed opportunities with making the most of this information, really. A few things to look for with competitor data include kind of what keywords and topics they're increasing in rank for and gaining a lot of traction around right now. This data is going to show you where they're concentrating their marketing efforts, as well as where they're doing a really good job matching content to the target audience's need. Also, with competitor keywords, you're going to want to see where they're outperforming you in terms of rank for your highly targeted keywords and what content is specifically associated with that. This gives you an idea of what your audience is really looking for and some ideas on how to modify existing content of yours or create new content that better serves that need. Along the same lines as content that they're performing well for on targeted keywords, you can also use this information to create similar content but in new mediums. For example, if your competition has a highly ranking blog post for a targeted keyword, consider making a video, infograph, SlideShare, some other form of content around that topic, because obviously this is something that your audience is interested in and they may want to consume across several different mediums. I also want to point out that competitor discovery is a really important part of kind of this keyword discovery and competitor analysis, as I mentioned previously, is since we've discussed it in other shows, I don't want to go into it too much, but the idea is, the competitors that you're already tracking, but what about the competitors, brands and companies that you're not following that are already taking audience members away from you, like that are already getting traffic. So the market and competitor landscape changes regularly. So you really need to keep an eye on who's creating content that's attracting to your audience to be able to stay ahead of the curve. We've got lots more information on kind of competitor discovery on the Ginsmetrics website. And, as you mentioned before, we're happy to answer questions, but I did want to mention that, just following the same 3 to 5 competitors throughout the entire lifespan of your brand is like a really bad idea. And you really need to be looking at it way more regularly than once a year, I think.
Yeah, I think that, again, that one and done mentality, as things are moving quickly and people are coming in and out of the space and differentiating products, you just never know when someone's offering is going to be closer to yours. And there also a hole might appear where you see an opportunity for some product development too, or for some content that just isn't being covered. So keeping an eye on that is a good idea. So speaking of keeping your finger on the pulse of things, how often do you think marketers should be updating and expanding their keyword lists?
Well, I haven't gotten to say it depends yet so far this show, which I know is your favorite response of mine. So I'm going to use it now. So it depends on a couple things. First is going to be your resources. Are you managing content, search, and marketing all yourself? Or, do you have an SEO team and a content team? If it's just you, this might be something that you have time for like once a quarter. I would say that that's sort of a baseline for some general updates. If you use a platform that does automated keyword and content management, this should be something you can actually go through pretty quickly because it'll take care of most of the heavy lifting for you. Ideally, you should be keeping up with keywords and content as often as you're rolling out new campaigns, SEO initiatives, or basically any marketing, like major marketing initiatives. So like you say, you have campaigns monthly or quarterly. I think it's a good idea to at least check in on it before you spend a lot of time and resources rolling out a new campaign. Second is going to be the size of your market. If you're in a rapidly growing or highly competitive space, you're going to want to keep an eye on keyword and topic changes as often as possible, because it's going to help you stay ahead of your competitors and engage your audience.
You know, sometimes, especially if people are working in a small team, they have a limited amount of time to do this, and they're looking at all this going, oh, really? You know, how am I going to get all this done? I'm already overwhelmed. So if you are working in a small team or you don't have a lot of time to spend on using keyword data to create better content, what are some things they should focus on?
You know, it's funny, we get this question a lot. And, you know, we're a small team, here at Ginza Metrics. And so I think that, we really sympathize with kind of the needs of what teams that don't have necessarily hundreds of folks focused on something have to do. So I'd say that there's a couple of important things that'll help make a big difference. The first is make sure you know what keywords are ranking for each of your pieces of content. This is going to tell you specifically what is driving your audience to that content, and then that will help you share and promote it more effectively. So you're going to leverage stuff you already have to make it more popular. It's also a good time to consider making similar forms of content across other mediums. I say this all the time and I still don't see people do it, so I keep saying it because I'm just gonna beat it into you, is if something's working really well and highly ranking and the keyword's getting a lot of search terms, make it into make some videos around that thing, ads, ebooks, white papers, whatever, get in there, make some additional content. The second thing I'd suggest is understanding what content your competitors are ranking for with regards to your target keywords, because this is really going to tell you where you're losing audience members and what is working that they want to consume. It's another opportunity, again, to create other forms of content around that same topic using those same keywords. But you really need to be able to see what's working for you and what's working across the market in general, because it's going to give you information on what the audience wants to consume. Now, another thing that gets missed out on a lot is these kind of gaps of good consumable content. So sometimes what you'll notice is the piece of content that's ranking for a particular topic or keyword for your audience is actually not super relevant, but it's the only thing that's out there right now. Or it's not leading to a product, it's leading to a Wikipedia page, right? So maybe what you want to do is be I recognize a gap being that yes, there is some content, but no, it's actually not the most educational, not the most recent, or doesn't point to any type of solution. It's more of an informative, post. So I would say that that's a really good opportunity for most people to take a look. I know we're towards the end of the show, so I want to finish by stressing that I am not suggesting that you take content and copy it from your competitors. Like I said last week when I mentioned this, that's bad for SEO and just generally lazy crap marketing. So what I mean when I say that you should take these topics and keywords and look at competitors' content and leverage it to make something similar is that if somebody has created content, let's say a beginner's guide to SEO, and it's downloadable on their website as a PDF, I'm going to be okay, this thing is really great, super thorough. I don't need to just copy and paste somebody else's beginner's guide to SEO, change a few words around and add it to my blog. What I would want to do instead was maybe create a video series on how to handle SEO for people that are new to it. Or maybe I want to create a slideshare that addresses, beginning SEO for agencies. So maybe I want to narrow the target, right? Maybe I want to be beginner's guide to SEO for agency, beginner's guide to SEO for contractors, beginner's guide to SEO for in-house, whatever it is. So take what's working, understand the keywords and topics that seem to be driving a lot of traffic to it and how people are finding it. And then what about that content is working? And then leverage that information to just do some better marketing on your own.
Yeah, and I want to, before we end the episode, I do want to go back to the beginning where you talked a little bit about how keywords aren't just singular words. And I think there's some content out there saying, oh, forget about keywords, keywords are past. And I think, again, like lots of things where they predict the demise of something, this is a little premature. But a lot of times we're talking about phrases too. keyword phrases and that long tail semantic search. So I don't know if you want to comment back on that. You've kind of touched on that already, but I just want to make sure people don't realize that, we're talking about topics as well as just keywords.
Yeah, I mean, so if you ever look at, Google AdWords, like keyword planning tool or anything like that, when it's actually suggesting the keywords to you, don't just blindly be like, yes, select all and like add them. Look at what some of these things it's suggesting are, and then look at kind of like the competition for those keywords, like what we're talking about here is, I always use trail running shoes as an example, and I don't know how I got started on this thing, but it's like a 3-year long example now, so I'm sticking with it. If I am the maker of like a women's trail running shoe company, I do not necessarily just want to target the word shoe or trail shoes. Like trail shoes is by far better, but I'm going to look at things like, I'm going to try to get my audience, look at what they're typing in, which is probably going to be like, what are the best trail running shoes? How do I find trail running shoes? How do I find the right size for my shoes? Like all these different things that people are thinking about when they're purchasing something like this. And as we talked about last week, when we were really talking about social, one of the kind of combined issues here is how do we actually talk about, things that are kind of adjacent keywords to a topic, right? And I think that there's a lot of really great information from last week on adjacent keywords and why you should really care about that. But people might care about like trail conditions in their local area, and if you have like local content teams or somebody that can create local content in some core areas, that could be really important. Or like weather related issues, or upcoming big events in the space. I think that all those things are really important to consider. And so when you're talking about keywords, it's not an individual word like shoe or trail, it's a phrase that's really descriptive. And when you really start to brainstorm these descriptive phrases, this is one of the places that the discovery board, or using a tool that does topic and keyword discovery, is worth its weight in gold, right? Like one of the reasons we baked it into Ginza is because doing a discovery board, quite honestly, takes some time. But it's really, really worth it, because what it's going to tell you is, how is your audience natively talking about this topic and subject, not just around products, but around the entire kind of like ecosystem that has to do with you.
Exactly. Well, I think that's all for today. You'll want to be sure to join us next week for the last episode in this 3-part series. We'll be talking about keyword data that informs better paid media opportunities. And if you're joining us for the first time today, you can get caught up on this series on the Ginza Metrics website. All of our Found Friday episodes are on our resources page. And of course, as I mentioned before, Erin and I are always here as resources to answer questions or to get more information. You can email us at Karen@ginzametrics.com or Erin@ginzametrics.com, and we'll get back to you immediately. Post your questions and comments on Twitter at #FoundFriday, and we'll respond there as well. So if you don't have anything else, Erin, I'm going to call it a day.
Sounds good. Enjoy your Friday.
Enjoy your Friday. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.